right. With that, Dan, over to you. What led to the book after 17 books?
Well, I've never written a book just to have another book out. In fact, after the first book I wrote, I didn't write a book for 10 years because I felt I'd said what I had to say. But then different mentors, which we can talk about later if you like, entered my life, and there was so much exciting new perspectives that it prompted me to begin writing again after 10 years. And then it was almost a book every year or two. And the final book feels like a good bookend from my most famous book, the first one, to through all the others. Each one was like an airplane lined up on the runway. I never knew which one was going to get in front. But once I started, then it conveyed a different facet of what I had to teach. In fact, there was a man named Stanislaw Lech who wrote a book during World War II. And I remember he said, I wanted to tell the world just one word. Unable to do that, I became a writer. And that's what happened to me too. So each book is different from the others. But the final one is a memoir, but it's not just about my life. There's a saying in writing, you need to capture the universal in the particulars of the book. And so I wanted to convey an image to help people understand the pitfalls and the blessings along the spiritual path for self-discovery, self-knowledge, and maybe seeking even the transcendent. Call it the Tao, if you will. So that's why the final book, and I'm officially retired after this book. This is my culminating work, where I really tell the true story behind all the mythology and so on that's developed around the peaceful warrior idea. And by the way, I might mention to people if they think, what is a peaceful warrior? How can you be peaceful and a warrior? Actually, I was teaching a martial arts course at Oberlin College when I was a college professor there. And I was teaching, it was Aikido, the Japanese art, Aikido, and Tai Chi. Taiji. And I was going to call it naturally the way of the warrior. But it didn't quite fit because these are both internal arts. They're more receptive. They're not aggressive arts. And so in a light bulb moment, I went, why don't I call it the way of the peaceful warrior? So the idea of peaceful heart, warrior spirit was from the beginning, but I didn't fully understand it back then. And it developed over time. So that's how I came to title the new book, Peaceful Heart, Warrior Spirit, which describes all of us. I view everyone as a peaceful warrior in training in the school of daily life. Because we're all seeking to live with a sense of serenity, equanimity, and peace in everyday life. But there are times we need a warrior's spirit to roll up our sleeves and just march into the challenges of everyday life. And it's about external strength, but even more internal strength.
Yeah, excellent. That's how I felt about it too, because my own dad is actually a Tai Chi master, and he practiced, and then and I learned from it. And of course, you have a very receptive audience here who, coming from China, knows very well the Chinese martial art, the Tao, and the Tai Chi. And then that's exactly right. I think if you look at, the yin and yang, that's exactly what it is. Everybody is both yin and yang, is both peaceful and have a warrior spirit at the same time. So in a way, it's a very oriental book, I guess.
Well, I was strongly influenced by the Taoist masters and also the Zen masters, which of course started in China, Chan, Buddhism. Yeah. So I was very influenced, and I always gravitated. I probably have at least several past lives in Asia.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I'm very excited for the launch of the Chinese version. I think many people will find find it very familiar, the concept being very familiar. And then also, of course, various practices you'll have done through both martial art training, self-defense training, and then lots of the spirit are very, kind of deeply rooted
Yes.
in Oriental wisdom as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then thank you. I think that's an excellent intro of the book. As Dan just said, this is, well, I didn't know that before the talk that it will be your final book. This is making me very privileged. But you never know. Maybe there will be another one on the way, right?
Maybe.
Let's say, because current science says we're going to live to 120 years old. So you have 50 years left. No, at least 40, I guess. Yeah. Well, so that's why, exactly. So I've flipped through your earlier books too. And this book gave me a sense that if the earlier books was about you as a teacher and what you're trying to teach, as if we're looking at you on the stage, this book is more like a backstage tour. Right? It's like taking people through like what, have made Dan who he is. Not only the great masters, but I think what's more attractive is all the, little, failures, I would call, or sometimes like laughable ones. That it's very, I guess, at least for me, it's very relatable. Like it doesn't, like that isn't this like divine person who just knows it all, but rather he, just like every one of us, learn from common day mistakes. And then it's a remarkable gift to whoever get to a sense of this very special backstage tour.
Well, let me say that I am a divine person in the same sense that we're all divine people.
Right, I agree. That's very well said.
Yes. But of course, we all have that connection. Most of our time is spent at the conventional level of life, taking care of business, children, families, education, work. And that's as our attention should be devoted to the realities of everyday life. But sometimes we also get a glimpse, a preview of the transcendent, call it life's big picture. And we get these breakthroughs, understanding what does Tao mean? How does it apply the flow of life? And so there's that element as well. And in fact, in one of my books called The Hidden School, I learned great lessons of the conventional and transcendental in Taishan Forest in China, where I stumbled across a school of Tai Chi and acrobatics, or wushu, if you will. So there again, that Asian element and the appreciation for the traditions.
Yeah.
And in the new book, many people who aren't familiar with my work don't know, but maybe there was a teacher in my first book who became quite famous called Socrates, an old service station attendant, played by Nick Nolte, an actor in the movie version of the book. And when I talk about 4 different mentors who influence, now we all have role models. We've all had people in our lives, our parents, friends, peers, teachers. We all have people who are role models and who inspired us. We might consider them even mentors. So, but mine were like archetypes. They were real people, but they're like archetypes because they had very different approaches to everyday life and to spiritual teachings. And when I describe them, I call one the professor, I call one the guru, one the warrior priest, and finally the sage who brought me back down to earth. But readers might say, well, wait a minute, where's Socrates? And that's when, in the preface to the new book, I reveal that, well, in a sense, I could say that Socrates is absolutely real. However, Dan Millman is a fictional character. So I am Socrates, and the dialogues in the book were those I made up. Now, they were based on a man I actually met in a service station about 3 o'clock in the morning. But he inspired that character who became my muse. And so people often say, oh, I wish I had a Socrates. And I say, you do, in my books, in my teachings. So then I hearken back to the ancient Greek, because when I met this old service station attendant, he reminded me of the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates. And that's how I came to name him that, the character in the teaching novel.
Yeah. thank you for that plug because that's very timely. Because I don't know if you know, but the Chinese title of your current book is basically called The Socrates at the Service Station 2.
Oh, really?
It's not called Peaceful Warrior, Peaceful Heart Warrior Spirit. I guess the reason was the first book became a bestseller in China, and then the name is exactly Socrates at a late night or midnight service station. So yeah, so this current book, the Chinese title is 深夜加油站的苏格拉底, Socrates in Chinese.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you for that plug-in because people might wonder like why like the book name is different, but basically exactly as was Dan has plugged in is because that's a theme through the first book and then this current one, but it almost as a flip of character because the first one, like, you know, he is fictional and you are real, and now kind of flipped around, right? So everybody has a real Socrates and our like names or labels or our career can be fictional.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
And it's natural to ask, well, how did you come up with those things you wrote? And that's when I talk about these different ways or paths, very different in terms of what I learned and what helped prepare me over a 20-year period for the way I teach now, which is a bit different from many approaches, many teachings, many new age teachings, because my background as an athlete leads me to value practical outcomes over abstract philosophy. We have enough to think about already. There's so many ideas floating around there that it may be useful for people to find a way to approach life in a simpler fashion.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful saying that the lesson is simple, the student is complicated. So ways to simplify and make our lives more direct and effective, which is what I teach, practical spirituality.
Yeah, indeed.